Welcome back to the MPC podcast. A couple weeks ago, we talked about Zone 2 training, and we had a ton of comments about who should do it, who shouldn't do it. And so we figured, you know what, let's have another conversation about endurance in general. And what we want to talk about today is what can the CrossFitter or CrossFit coach take from the endurance community and apply it into their CrossFit training. So we have Coach Mike, Coach Jake on today, and we're going to jump into this topic. Mike, you've done an Ironman. You also have done CrossFit for 20 years. Is that right? I'm from the beginning, before there was even CrossFit games, something like that. So like dinosaur years, something. And so you've been able to experience what it's like to be a CrossFit athlete, an endurance athlete. I mean, Ironman is the pinnacle of endurance. And you've also coached a lot of those athletes. So I'd love to kind of hear from you, maybe the initial take on what are the differences when you're doing those training or how you think about it. And then we can kind of tie it back in and what CrossFitters can learn.
Yeah, I mean, so the reason I first got into it, I was basically done competing in CrossFit, and I'd kind of moved on from that phase of life. And so obviously I was like, I'm not going to compete anything. I'm just going to train for health. And that lasted for like 4 weeks. And I was like, I got to do something competitive.
You got bored real quick.
Yeah, I got bored real quick. And so I started training for an Ironman. And of course, just like everything else, taking things to the extreme, it was like, I'm not just going to do a mini triathlon or something like that. I wanted to do the full. So I just kind of dove in head first, and at the time I wanted to coach myself with that. With the CrossFit background, I knew that if I signed up for just a normal triathlon coach, like it just wasn't going to work with my brain and whatnot, and wanted to coach myself. So I experimented with a lot of things. And so, I don't know where we want to jump in, but I spent basically a year training for the full Ironman, and I didn't want to go into it like I've seen other CrossFitters go into it where they just use CrossFit to train for it. I wanted to actually train for it and try to do it as best as possible while also experimenting with different ideas that I had around it.
Yeah, it seems silly to me that, and I've seen this happen too, so that's why I'm saying it, that CrossFitters continue to use CrossFit to train for a very long event. You know, the average CrossFit workout is 8 to 14 minutes, and an Ironman, how long did it take you?
Yeah, it took me just under 13 hours.
Yeah, so it's just like a different world, right? It's Earth versus Pluto or something like that.
Can you mentally get through it and even physically get through it? Yeah, but like,
are you going to perform at your best level?
Are you going to perform? Or are you just going to be suffering? Like, what is it actually proving? Is it proving that CrossFit works? I don't know. So I wanted to go and like see what I could actually do in a year's worth. And I had zero background in that. Like my background was CrossFit. Like I said, I started CrossFit when I was 19, 20 years old. So I really didn't have any other.
How old are you now, Mike?
27.
I love that.
40. So, I didn't have any other, I didn't do any sports before. I played golf before. So I didn't have any sports that gave me an endurance background or anything like that. So
you were learning from scratch, but I honestly think that this is one of the things that made CrossFit so awesome, at least when I got in, is that we were learning things from all the other communities, right? Like we grabbed weightlifting and pulled a bunch of experts in, or strongman, powerlifting, endurance, all of those things became, these subject matter experts came into the sport. And then as CrossFitters, we could learn from them. How can we become excellent in these new modalities that we're trying to learn? And I think as a coach, it probably was a net benefit for you because yes, you knew CrossFit, you understood exercise science from that perspective, but when you learn these different protocols, how people approach it differently in a true endurance sport, you could start to take some of those things and maybe pull them into CrossFit training.
Yeah, even like from a skill perspective, because I could swim across the pool, but I did not know how to swim, basically. I could do freestyle, like I said, somewhat, but it was cool because I had been doing CrossFit, coaching CrossFit for a really long time. To your point, I'd gotten pretty comfortable with that. And so this kind of rejuvenated that desire for learning and desire for both learning as a coach and learning as an athlete, because I was literally learning a new sport. I mean, obviously biking and running, you know how to do those things, but so that was kind of more learning the training of it, but the swimming was learning a whole new sport, basically. And so it gave a new perspective of all those things. So, yeah.
One of the things that every CrossFitter likes to hang their hat on is the high intensity across broad time and modal domains, right? Like there's functional movements, high intensity, whatever. In the endurance space, it is very different. And the endurance work or courses that I've taken, Obviously, there's some nuance to this now because there's so many new endurance coaches that are trying different things. But I would say that most of them kind of preach this true 80-20 rule, right? So 80% of someone's training is maybe a lower intensity or slower than race pace, whether that's a marathon, a high rocks, an Ironman, whatever it may be. And then 20%, you're bringing some intensity to it. Are there CrossFitters that should think about their training that way? Or how do you balance those two things for a CrossFit athlete?
Yeah, so I think the hard part is, and this probably gets into, or not probably, it does get into a little bit of nutrition as well, but the hard part is CrossFitters have a hard time even finding that zone, especially if they're running or swimming, because you just can't go slow enough. So for me, it took me probably 6 months to be able to go on a true zone 2 run. Because I just couldn't be physically running.
Yeah, you got to walk some of it, right?
I had to walk. And so so the takeaway there is like, you can't just add a zone 2 recovery day on Thursday and it be a run and know that that's a recovery session, because it's probably not. It's probably taking more out of you than you realize. And so many people do that and think that they ran easy and their heart rate was 170 or whatever. And it's like, that's not a recovery run.
Yeah, it's also probably, and WOD Science actually put something out on this, that it's an indicator you're probably not as fit as you think you are. Yeah. Like if you have to walk to stay in zone 2, it just means that your aerobic system doesn't work very well.
And then we take it even a step further and try to do zone 2 with some CrossFit stuff, which I know WOD Science kind of talked about that a little bit with our camp and stuff. And I was like, I don't know that you can actually do that. Like, can you do burpees at zone 2? And they just implemented some rest in there. And it's like, I don't know that that's the same.
I think it showed that
same thing.
Nobody in our camp really could, right?
Yeah. Again, to the point that most CrossFitters are not actually endurance athletes. They're not enduring enough. And I don't know if you have to be completely honest, just because the nature of the sport is it's not an endurance test. Correct. Maybe you could argue over 20 events like they're going to do at the CrossFit Games this year, it kind of becomes a 4-day endurance test, but it's totally different than an Ironman.
Yeah.
I just actually had to write a 13-page paper on that, where it was like such an oversimplified question. You had to pick a sport of your choosing, exercise phys class, and then it was the broad question: is it predominantly aerobic or anaerobic? And then you're like, oh no, like how am I gonna get them to understand this? But I think, Brandon, I made the point that you did, where it's like, well, first we have to just look at the CrossFit Games, 10 events over 3 days, and obviously the aerobic system is running in the background for recovery, and because of that, we're going to bend it toward, I made the argument it's biased towards aerobic versus purely anaerobic, which I think we would all agree on that, correct? Like,
but this goes
within the events
themselves. Well, even that. So there was a study on Isabel, actually. This was interesting. Some people in the podcast world are so good at being like, this study written by this person at this date. I was like, there was a study, but you can look it up, Isabel, PubMed. And they actually did a study on athletes doing Isabel, and they were considered like trained CrossFit athletes. I think they had been doing it for 2 or 3 plus years. And it was like 15 or so athletes. And they looked at like VO2 kinetics during Isabel, and they were all around the 2-minute mark. So they were all pretty quick at it. And it was actually 60% anaerobic pathways, but still 40% aerobic, which I actually found to be pretty interesting in such a high intensity workout.
Sure. Well, I mean, yes, to your point, I mean, this is going into bioenergetics, but the aerobic system's always turned on, right?
And because of that, I think that you have to make the argument. Yeah. But we're getting too far into the weeds, I think, on that.
Well, that was a really interesting, it made me kind of question everything that I was doing. Was at some point, I guess it was maybe a month or so after my Ironman, I did, was it 14.4 with the 60 cal row?
With the ring muscle ups at the end?
Yeah. And I beat my best time that I'd ever had. And which is just, I hadn't been doing for the year of that training that I was doing. For the first part of it, I was doing like 2 strength training sessions a week, and maybe a little bit of CrossFit. And then but for the last month to 6 weeks, I literally did swim, bike, run, and that was it. And then when I tested that was not long after the Ironman. And so it was like, obviously I hadn't been doing muscle ups, power cleans, hadn't been doing any of that. But my lungs were significantly better.
You just felt so much better going through, what was a 14-minute cap, I think, something like that.
And for me, and I've always said this, for me, I'm short, I've got short limbs. So like the muscle endurance of things was never the issue. It was just, can I breathe and can I keep going? So for me, that makes sense. And I always compare it like conversely to somebody like Luke, who's got long arms, long limbs, like that would not have the same effect on him. So it depends on the person.
Yeah.
To one more quick digression, just because I'm curious now, for how you guys would answer this. We can hit it and move on. The second paper I had to write, and there was a series of questions, but then it asked, okay, well, what skeletal muscle property, and we're looking at it from like the neuromuscular response, is most often tested in your sport, or what's the predominant skeletal muscle property? So would it be, strength, power, speed, and then they added endurance, which doesn't really fit in the, traditional force velocity curve. But how would you guys answer that between those four?
For CrossFit?
For the CrossFit Games specifically. You have to answer it for the CrossFit. You have to pick an event, right? Otherwise, you're going to get
I was going to say, because all of them are so different. Right?
Yeah, the 2025 CrossFit Games.
Well, I mean, the first event is totally different than like
But if you had to
run and
categorize
snatch.
the whole games and you had to pick one, which of those four would it be? That's most likely to determine the winner.
Yeah, I would probably just go safe and go right in the middle, like a power-based.
What would you say, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I said. Okay, we're good. All right.
I don't know. That's an interesting question.
It's very hard to limit it to just one, but yeah.
I think the kind of first takeaway though, Mike, and you tell me if you'd agree with this, is that the endurance community does a lot of kind of longer, easy work to build a robust aerobic system. Yeah. And that can be a net benefit in CrossFit as well. Yeah. And to your point, someone you brought Luke up, like there are plenty of athletes that maybe don't need to do that because there are other limitations. Luke's not this case, but a lot of people, we talked about this on the Zone 2 podcast, just need to get stronger. That's their number one limitation. Right. So we don't want them doing a ton of easy work. We want them to get stronger. Or some people just are horrible at gymnastics. So they just got to get better at gymnastics first. And that's the dial we move up. But for someone that's maybe well-rounded, already strong enough, and they want to get better at the sport, maybe thinking through like, how can I modify my training to do a little bit more of that easy work, or just kind of like build a bigger base so that I can push myself when it matters. Yeah.
And I think the underlying but the underlying thing that we want to look at, and this kind of leads into the next point, I think, but it's the ability to accumulate as much volume as possible, which is what the sport at the end of the day kind of has to do. You have to be able to accumulate a lot of training volume. And so if you do that, if you do everything at maximal intensity or maximal strength, you're not going to be able to accumulate a ton of volume. The reason, again, kind of going back to Luke, is he had accumulated a ton of volume, and so he could handle all of his training and recover from it and continue to get better without injury or without setbacks or without different things. And so you have to, now whether that's doing Zone 2 specifically or just pulling back a little bit on the intensity of everything so that you can do more sessions and more repetitions, then that's going to be a net benefit in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this plenty of times on the podcast. You think about all the volume, like even in a simple open workout, 240 wall balls in the one workout this year. Maybe it was more, and I can't remember what the number was. Or, I always use the example of Murph, but like that's just a lot of contractions. Yeah. And so you do have to have, a robust muscular endurance, and you have to be able to handle that. Otherwise, especially in a multi-day event, you're going to be wrecked after the first day, which is what would happen to me right now. Like maybe I could crush the first event and then I'm just destroyed for the rest of the weekend. So teaching our athletes how to be able to handle more volume. But to your point, Mike, the key there is how do you recover between that? Yeah. And so it can't just be high intensity all the time where you're burying yourself, because it's not only recovering the soft tissue, but allowing your nervous system to recover, which I think is a danger in the sport of CrossFit. And people, they bury themselves with high intensity workouts, one after the next, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
I'm curious, do y'all see this more in the borderline games level athletes or like the everyday CrossFit class? And the reason I'm saying that is because I've found anecdotally that people that are able to perform at a very high level and perform for years on end have, even though they say they're pushing to max intensity all the time, they have like a subconscious governor. Like we know that one of Rich's best qualities was that he could pace any workout appropriately, which means he's got a governor in there. Contrary to Luke, not to throw him under the bus, but he didn't have that self-governor as well. But because Rich did that so well, like he was never actually just smashing himself from the start all the way through. And so I see that more those people that can handle those high volumes, they tend to just have a little bit of governor in there where they're holding a little bit back and not just completely burying themselves. And you almost see that more. Now, what comes first, kind of the chicken or the egg? Does he build that through slowly building his volume up, whereas class members haven't done that and haven't ever taken the time to build a volume because they're stuck into an hour class setting and they have, your 8 to 15 minute workout every day. So they never build that volume. So that would be, a point for that of like, you have to be able to get out of that space, do some intervals, do some different things to where you can actually accumulate a volume to where you can recover between those pieces.
Yeah. I've seen both for sure, to answer your question. And I think that those that are successful in the sport, almost all of them have that governor.
Yeah.
Like you just almost naturally have to get to the amount of volume that you need for the CrossFit Games or even a semifinal, where you learn how to kind of fluctuate the volume and intensity in your training naturally. Mm-hmm. And to your point, like Rich did that so well, and he did that even better in competition. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the mistakes that once the high levels, even if they do that really well in training, they get to the games and they just blow up because they just like, I got to go out fast. Whereas like Rich always was like, maybe he's in 5th, 6th, 8th, 10th, whatever. And then he'd pass everyone in the last one because he never had to tap into 5th gear until that last round.
Yeah. So is that because, but again, it goes back to the question, like, how did he get that ability? Was that because he slowly built that huge volume and he was able to be fresh and ready on Sunday, or is that a self-governor or a combination of both?
I think it has to be a both, right? He slowly built the volume, but he also knew kind of when to pick his poison. Yeah. And as coaches, or maybe if you're a coach out there listening to this, that's one of the things we should take from the endurance community as CrossFit coaches. They're very thoughtful, most good coaches in endurance community, about when they bring the intensity versus when they're doing some easy work and how to balance that. And I've seen, and I've made this mistake myself, where I pile on either too much volume too soon, or just too much volume in general, or too much intensity in a training week, instead of having maybe like a high, low, moderate kind of undulating, intensity cycle throughout a training week.
I think trying to figure out like he didn't do any zone 2 training to my knowledge, which is the application of CrossFit with this. It was like, okay, what's my takeaway as a CrossFitter? How can I accumulate more volume at an intensity that's relative to our sport? So I don't want to just accumulate really slow volume. That doesn't really apply directly to our sport. I can't go max effort all the time either. So how do I accumulate this volume? And that's one of the things I kind of played with the Ironman training. And I think who was the endurance guy that talked to us a few weeks ago? Mark
Cullen.
Yeah. It was interesting hearing him talk about the intensities of like threshold. And I think that when we do that as CrossFitters, I think a lot of times people can push. For so long, it was talked about like you don't want to be in that middle zone and like what that middle zone is. And you want to either be slower or really fast. And I think there's potentially an argument for going too much to those extremes and not spending enough time in that middle zone, which ends up kind of being that 8 to 15 minute time domain. Mm-hmm. And so with my Ironman, I started doing 400 meter repeats, and somewhere along the way got the idea I was going to do 40 of them. So I slowly built up week after week and did 40 by 400, which if you ask any endurance coach or even ask me personally, like, what is that training? I don't really know. It was just a thing. But what I ended up doing was spending 10 miles of training at a relatively high intensity, but I could recover from it because it wasn't like I went and ran 10 miles for time and accumulated this race pace effort. It also wasn't really slow 10 miles. So I ended up accumulating a good bit of volume. And so how can a CrossFitter apply that? Well, when we're doing these 2, 3, 4 minute intervals, yes, they need to be hard, but they don't need to be like burying yourself every time. And if maybe we spread those out because it's different contractions, whereas running, once you build a volume up, running is relatively easier than doing wall balls and burpees, but maybe that's spread out over the week instead of doing 40 by, minute and a half on one day. Maybe you do that throughout the week and you're accumulating a bunch of volume at a pretty good intensity.
Yeah. And that's where the fold over approach would be like a good practical example of how you can make that sport specific as you get closer to competition. Right. So to use your example, so 4,400s, maybe you did 4 days a week of 10 400s.
Right.
And then you fold it. So maybe like it becomes 20, 10, 10, 30, 10 as just a really simple example. And you're going to need that, right? To your point, like, hey, sustaining your, having that much intensity over a 2 to 3 day competition. Even some weekend competitions and local comps can get pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
In terms
especially
of
when you're racing other people.
Yeah. And like you said, Brandon, that's how you build it, which we do that a lot. I don't know, Brandon, if you want to talk about I don't know if we've ever mentioned that, how do we actually build up to weekend competition volume? Like how we think about that as a framework. If you're 6 weeks out and the competition is a 1 day event with 4 workouts.
Yeah. I mean, a really simple way to think about it is, let's say that the competition's on a Saturday. And so as a coach, I'm thinking through this, we're 6 weeks out. The first Saturday, 6 weeks out, maybe I just give them one hard workout, right? And they maybe do some accessory pieces, whatever. But we want to bring some intensity to this. This is close to race pace, or we're at race pace. And then 5 weeks out, maybe we do one hard workout again, and then some intervals after that. Maybe we spread that out by an hour and a half or 2 hours, trying to make it more sport specific and realistic. And then we basically just titrate that up to where we eventually get them maybe 2.5 or 3 weeks out to true, like a simulation weekend. They're doing all 4 workouts and then we taper after that. That's just a really simple and effective way to do it. Same thing can be true if you have a full weekend comp. We have games athletes that are preparing right now, and I'm already building structures out for the Mayhem team, for example, or my individuals, where they're starting that process of now they're going to do Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday workouts, which is totally different than what they do throughout the normal season. And it's just going to be one hard workout on a Thursday, Friday's training, Saturday's a hard workout, Sunday's training. And then next week is going to be 2 hard workouts on a Thursday, training, 2 hard workouts on a Saturday, training on a Sunday. And then again, we just naturally titrate that before a simulation. We do a full simulation, and then that's what kicks into their taper, which means we're reducing the volume, keeping the intensity really relatively high so that we're peaking their nervous system for the event.
Boom, what a protocol. I mean, that's a nugget. Just a lot of people aren't thinking. It's really simple, right? Super simple, but nobody's thinking that way. And like the local competition setting, especially too, as well. We know games athletes who'll be like, I'm not changing my schedule.
Yeah, sure. But the ones that want to do really well, they figure out how to adjust it to make sure it fits. And training at the times that you're going to train, like even something as simple as that, like, hey, we're going to have a 9 p.m. event at the CrossFit Games or an 8 p.m. I'm going to do a training session at that time.
What about the athlete that's like, that doesn't matter?
Yeah.
Does it really matter that much, Brandon? What would you say?
Well, I mean, I think that you want to be as realistic to the sport that you're performing.
Yeah. What about the principle of specificity?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's really the only argument that I would give is you want to scrimmage the sport that you're going to do. And you wouldn't do this all year. I think that's important. We always talk about our training phases, and if you have a limiter phase, you just have a normal structure, right? Or if you have a bridge phase, you're kind of slowly bridging into CrossFit. And then when you get into that peaking time, then you want it to look like the sport that you're competing in. And that is true amongst all sports, right? You are a golfer, you're on the course and trying out shots that are going to happen in the tournament. You played football, you're going to scrimmage before your first game to get the game speed and practice under pressure. And we need to do the same thing in CrossFit. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it is interesting though, if you look at endurance sports, they almost never go the full distance before the events, and never go at race pace for even less time.
Well, the cost is too high.
They go, but like if you're talking about simulating a full weekend, you could make an argument for the cost being too high there as well.
Fair.
So if I'm there, say their long ride for an Ironman is a 100-mile ride when they're going to go 112, but they're doing a 100-mile ride without the swim before it and maybe just a short run after it. But even that 100-mile ride is not at even race pace. It's even slower. Mm-hmm. And then you're expected to perform based off all your training build up, competition environment, adrenaline, all these other things play a factor. And so that's where I leaned, which I never made it to the games, but on like Sunday training versus competing, is like, I'm not training on Sunday. And it wasn't because I didn't take it serious, but it was like, I'm not adjusting my schedule to train on Sunday because I know I'm not going to wake up on Sunday and be like, oh no, I don't know how to train. I don't know how to compete on Sunday. Like, I'm going to go to the facility. I'm going to go to the venue. I'm going to get my warm up in, use adrenaline, use cortisol.
I don't know if, like, I'm not aware of any research of how much it would matter that much. I still would, I'd probably lean more towards Brandon. That like, if I had an athlete that wants to crush it, I'm like, the counter argument to like, does it matter that much, to me is not as strong as the argument that like you train on the day that you're going to test.
Yeah.
To me it's like simple.
I think like the 9 p.m. track workout, Like I think that is, I lean definitely more towards specificity on that.
Yeah. Time of the day specifically. Right. So nutrition is dialed around it, when like timing of your warm up and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
One of the things you said that I think kind of brings us back into talking about volume, intensity, all of that is you did those 40 by 400s and you mentioned that, yes, it was a lot of volume. You had some intensity, but you were able to maintain the same pace throughout.
Yep.
And I think that is something we can learn from the endurance community that CrossFitters make a mistake on all the time, right? They start their interval training and every single MPC athlete has intervals in their training, probably almost every week, right? I've seen all the other coaches' programs. We do a lot of interval training. And then the first one they blow up, right? Because naturally as CrossFitters, we're like, we got to attack this. Yeah. And so then they blow up and then the rest of their training is inefficient because they're already messed up, right? Yeah. So then they can't get the volume that's needed. They can't get the right zone that's needed. And so then they look back, they're sore, they're wrecked for 3 days and there's no net benefit to it. And so I think that's something that we can learn from the endurance community and people that are listening to this when you are doing those intervals or even, a 15 or 20 minute AMRAP, maybe on a Saturday throwing down with friends, learning, like you said with Rich, how do I adjust my gears for the first 5 minutes, then from 5 to 10. Yeah. And then go from there.
Before you answer that, for those listening who are like, we've heard this before. I went to a local comp 2 weeks ago and I think we're in a bubble, Brandon. Yeah. Yeah. Cause sometimes I hear you saying all that. I'm like, yeah. Everybody's going to know that. No, we're in a bubble. I go to the local comp.
No, I see it.
I know. Yeah. And I'm watching 3, 2, 1, go. It's a masters competition. And just same old, yeah, man.
I saw it at Syndicate with the best athletes in the world.
It was a really weird event. They started with a 300 meter, it wasn't even 300 meters, but kettlebell farmer carry. And it's a 20-minute workout with chest to bar and rowing and thrusters. And the guys just came out bat out of hell, dead sprint with the kettlebells. And I'm just like, wait, what's going on? Unbroken on the chest to bar first round. And every single guy in that heat at the end was breaking, it was 15 chest to bar into 4 or 5 sets.
Yeah.
And it's just same old.
Yeah. We see it at the highest levels of the sport. I think it's gotten much better at the games, which is nice to see. People are, the best definitely have learned how to pace because they know they have to. Now they're still going fast no matter what because they're so fit. But again, I saw it at Syndicate. I saw it at Del Mar. These semifinal athletes, the ones that are on the bubble, a lot of them, it's because of pacing mistakes. Yeah. It's not necessarily just a fitness thing.
Mike, sorry, I jumped in. You were going to talk about how you some tools to
I was going
to
go with it kind of leads into, I know, another point of leaning into monotony and being able to do the same thing over and over again. And I think that the Ironman, I was in a good headspace for it because I was done competing. So it was like a mental relief to be able to just swim, bike, run. And that's all I got to do. So there was that component of where I was in life and stuff. But what I think I started with 16 by 400 and literally every Thursday, I think it was that I did it was 16 by 400, 18 by 400, 20 by 400 until I got to 40 by 400. So we do 4 weeks of the same.
People are bored out of their mind.
People are and that's with changing movements within the 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So if we gave somebody the same 4-minute interval for 4 or 5 weeks with the exact same movements in there, they'd be like, why are we doing the same program over and over again? But you look at, I have a girl that did the Ironman with me, who's a good friend of mine. She still does triathlon. She's never done CrossFit. She's only ever done triathlon. And she's the same thing every week. And she's perfectly happy and fine and progressing and seeing great results, but it's the ability to just do the same thing and continually get better at it. And I think I've talked about this before, but that's a undervalued quality I had coming from golf because I was used to you're literally going to the golf course and doing the same exact thing every day. And sometimes you're better, sometimes you're not. And
Mine's
so it's just
usually
highly
not.
frustrating. But it's just consistency of doing the same thing. And I think that's a problem. And we've talked about this with the season structure with high level athletes and stuff and being able to compete, but there's just not enough time to build this big, robust volume, depending on how many times you're competing throughout the year and stuff. You can't spend 4 months building 4-minute intervals out that long.
Yeah. Would you say then, a final point would be that CrossFitters should learn from the endurance community how to embrace monotony?
How to embrace monotony and how to embrace long, slow progressions. Meaning, this progression is not a 4-week cycle.
It may be 12 weeks, 16 weeks, something like that. Yeah.
And so, Mike, can you give an example? Are you referring to, okay, I'm going to do 4 sets of the same movements. 4 sets week 1, same movements, MGW, right?
Yeah.
21 cow ski, 15 chest to bar, 9 thruster, right?
Yeah.
And then next week, 5 sets, 6 sets. Is that what you're talking about? What do you mean specifically by embracing monotony in the off season and that sort of training?
Yeah, I think that could definitely be it. Like it, and obviously as coaches, we have a little bit of reservation for that as well. One, because we're CrossFit coaches, and so we like variety as well. At least that's my bias as well. If I write the same thing, same thing 2 or 3 times in a row, I start to get bored writing it. But like,
and that real quick, ain't that the truth? We may get bored more than even the athlete.
We make
is
it more
getting
complicated
bored.
sometimes.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
Like if we know somebody, like you mentioned embracing monotony before the podcast, like on doing drills for muscle ups or something like that. So it may be as simple as doing drills over and over again to get better at something. It may be one step further of doing like 2 muscle ups on the minute for 8 minutes, and then 9 minutes, and then 10 minutes, and so forth, and building that up. Or it could be like, hey, you need to get better at thruster burpee combo, so you're going to do intervals of thruster burpees for 12 weeks.
What about the counter argument, with like if anybody's just hardcore CrossFit, it's you, right? Like your OG, drank the Kool-Aid, like in all the good ways. Yeah. And their rebuttal to you would be, that's not CrossFit.
Yeah.
And your response would be what?
What is CrossFit?
Wait, my head.
Yeah. I mean, it is the CrossFit Games is also not the original design of CrossFit. Mm-hmm. So then you do have to define what is CrossFit, because the original, like what is CrossFit when I started it, because there was no sport, was you're just trying to be like across broad time and modal domains. So we weren't trying to be elite at everything. We weren't trying to be elite at the CrossFit Games. I mean, I was telling my son the other day, because we drove past the fire station, there was a guy hitting a sledgehammer on a tire. I was like, that's the stuff that we used to do. Like literally we would do random things, random tasks. Mm-hmm. Of course they had sledgehammer hitting in the games one year, but that's different.
They're bringing it back this year.
You can't keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. So the point is, the original design of CrossFit was kind of minimal effective dose to get you most fit across broad time and modal domains, I would say. And so, but that's not the case anymore if you're competing for sport. Mm-hmm. And so if you're competing for sport, like you always say, you have to look at the test and backtrack from there of what we have to actually accomplish. Whereas before, when the original design of CrossFit, when it wasn't a test, there was no like benchmark of like, you're good enough at this thing, so you now need to work on this more. You're just always working on everything. Even if you have a strength bias, you're still going to hit the strength day, because it was 5x5 back squat on .com. And then the next day is a 5K run, and you're just going to do the 5K run. You don't care if you're already stronger than you are enduring, or if you're already enduring than you are strong. It doesn't really matter. You're working on everything. But now you have the test. And so we know that if you snatch 345, you're probably good on that. We should focus our attention on something else, or vice versa.
To add one more point to the monotony conversation real quick, maybe we wrap it up here, but that's something that like gets me a little fired up too. It's like a social critique, or even get a bit like philosophical with it. But I always think too, it's like anything in life. When we take a good thing like variety and we make it into an ultimate thing, when we train for variety all the time, right? Or we live, like, I always think like, the first thing that always comes to my head is like, what good thing in life is like cultivated or comes from constant variety?
Yeah.
It's like most good things in life require embracing monotony to some extent, right? Yeah. Like you want to have a long lasting, happy marriage, you have to embrace some monotony.
Yeah.
I know I might get some kickback on that. It's like, it should be fun all the time. Look, come on, it's not going to be, right? Like
no,
parenting, by the way, sanctification, becoming like Christ, is going to require you to wake up and spend daily time in the Word, in prayer. It's not always going to be sexy or exciting. And I do think that that's a great thing that CrossFit brought in. Like, hey, we can have variety. But I do think that actually that variety has cost people more than just their like linear progressions in their fitness, to be honest with you, because you start living by that. Variety is like an ethic, so to speak. Now you're getting bored in everything all the time.
Right.
So just to your point, Mike, like other people don't get it. Like the high school kids I coach in the garage, like they don't need the workouts to change every time.
Yeah.
Like they don't even know that that's a thing.
Yeah.
Well,
and I think it's like, trying to get through to my kids that like, it's not always the progression is not always in anything, to your point, not exercise, but fun is not the ultimate objective. And so like, just cause it's the same, like just cause it's not the most sexy program or not the most fun program, that's not really the objective, especially if you're competing for sport. Now, do you have to hate your program? No, obviously if you hate your program, we either need to figure something out or you may need to just change your sport, but it's not about fun every day. It shouldn't be like just the most exciting workout you've ever seen on paper.
I went on a run yesterday. Blake is in town. You know, one of the coaches who went through our mentorship. He's here for the camp, and we went on a run yesterday, and we were like 2-3 miles in, and Blake goes, "Don't you get bored with this?" and I said, "Yes. Yeah. I get very bored with this, but I have a goal. I want to run sub 3 hours."
Yeah.
And this is really boring, and I don't really like it that much. Yeah. But I keep picturing myself running through the finish line, sub 3, at 200 pounds, so I can tell Coffee Chris that I accomplished it. But like, that's what drives me. Yeah. I think we need more of that.
Yeah.
So the girl that I was talking about, she did 5 hours.
Candace, right?
No. Okay. That's a different one. But no, the girl I did my Ironman with.
Okay.
She would do a 5-hour ride on her trainer.
Wow. That's impressive. That's dedication too. Yeah. That's good. Well, all right. So 3 takeaways from the endurance community I think CrossFitters can learn from. It doesn't mean that you replicate the endurance community because CrossFit's needs are different. Right?
Don't do that.
Yeah. But I do think, for those that need it, maybe a longer, slower, easy work to build a robust aerobic system can really help, especially in the off season. We touched on that for the certain type of athlete in our Zone 2 podcast. Learning how to handle more volume, but also balancing that with recovery, which may mean fluctuating your training from day to day and then embracing monotony.
Yep.
Perfect.
All right. See you guys.